His breath was still warm on my skin. Our clothes were somewhere on the floor, and I knew. When the sun came up, he was supposed to marry my sister. But in this moment, tangled in sheets and silence, he whispered, "I've already made my choice." If you want more stories that begin where the rules break, tap like, hit subscribe, and stay with us. We're just getting started. The wall was too quiet. Not literally. Outside, the clatter of preschoolers echoed through the community center like wind chimes in a storm. Inside, brushes scraped over concrete, the fluorescent lights buzzed, and the hum of the old heater pulsed against the silence. But the wall, the one Emily was painting, refused to speak back to her. She stood on the ladder's second rung, her fingers stained blue, eyes fixed on the unfinished shape of a man's face. The mouth was done, curved ever so slightly at the corner. The jawline was sharp, assertive. But the eyes were still empty, just white ovals on a canvas of shadow and fire. Eyes are where the truth lives, she thought. And maybe that's why she hadn't painted them. She wasn't sure she could. A small hand tugged at her paint-streaked apron. "Miss Emily," came a tiny voice, breathless. "You forgot your tea again." She smiled down at Jonah, a 7-year-old, boy with wide eyes and a fascination with clouds. "Thank you, Mr. Responsible," she said, ruffling his curls and accepting the paper cup with both hands like it was a trophy. He pointed at the mural. "Is that a real person?" She hesitated. "I don't know," she said softly. "I think I saw him once. Or maybe I dreamed him." Jonah looked up at her, then at the half-painted man, then nodded solemnly, like he understood completely. "He looks lonely." Emily swallowed. "Yeah," she whispered. "He does." Later that afternoon, when the paint had dried and the children had been picked up, Emily stood alone in the studio, sipping the now cold tea and staring at the wall like it might finally answer her back. Her hands itched to keep going, but she didn't move. She felt unfinished. Like the wall. Her phone buzzed. Madeline. She stared at the name for a moment. It felt like a telegram from a different life. Her sister never called just to talk. There was always a reason, a message, a move on the chessboard. She answered. "Emily." Madeline's voice came through smooth as glass. "You're coming to Vermont, right? The wedding is next week." "I wasn't sure you wanted me there," Emily replied honestly, still watching the man on the wall. "Oh, don't be dramatic," Madeline said with a laugh that didn't reach her words. "You're family. Of course I want you. Besides, Alex wants to meet you again." Emily stiffened. "Again?" "He said he vaguely remembered meeting you years ago. Some charity thing? Anyway, he's been asking about you. You'll stay at the estate with us, of course." Emily could feel something shift in her ribs, like a thread being pulled without permission. "Okay," she said after a moment. "I'll come." 3 days later, the Hale estate rose out of the Vermont fog, like a castle no one remembered building. Stone, slate, iron, and glass. Its silhouette was brutal and beautiful in equal measure. Emily stood outside the car in her canvas coat, a sketchbook pressed to her chest, the cold biting into her fingertips. She hadn't been here since her father's funeral. Back then, she was the invisible sister, tucked behind Madeline's black veil and designer heels. No one had looked at her. No one had asked who she was. And that was fine. That was always fine. Until now. Inside, the warmth of the entry hall slapped her like a memory. Dark wood, high ceilings, and a chandelier that looked like it had survived a few wars. Staff moved like ghosts. Everyone knew what to do, except her. "Miss Warren?" a voice called gently. She turned. He stood there, Alex Hale. Even in person, he didn't look real. He looked drawn, as if someone had taken great care to carve him out of shadow and steel. Dark gray suit, clean lines, a face that didn't need to speak to command attention. He didn't smile, but his gaze locked on hers and stayed there, like a hook in still water. "You're Madeline's sister," he said. Emily nodded. "I am. I've seen your work." She blinked. "You have?" "The community mural downtown. The one with the boy and the violin." A pause. It made me stop. Her mouth opened, then closed. He stepped closer. "You didn't sign it." "I never do," she replied quietly. "Why?" Her voice caught in her throat. "Because I'm not sure I want to be known." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or guilt, or something older. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. The room they gave her was at the far end of the east wing. Quiet. Light-filled. A small glass studio attached to the side overlooked the woods. And in the middle of the studio was an easel. And on the easel her painting. Her unfinished man. She stared at it, stunned. There was a note. "We thought you might want to keep working." A-H-H, her knees nearly gave. That night, as the wind brushed against the glass and the trees danced like old ghosts, Emily sat beside her painting and touched the edge of the canvas. He had seen it. Not just seen it, understood it. And in that one look, he had made her feel more visible than a lifetime of being someone else's sister. She picked up her brush. The eyes would come next. The morning came with soft fog rolling off the trees, and the faint scent of cinnamon and old pinewood in the halls. Emily hadn't slept. She had stayed up painting, letting the brush carry things her voice never could. By the time she put the brush down, the man on the canvas had eyes, and she didn't know whether that terrified her or set her free. Breakfast was held in a sun-drenched dining room that felt more like an old European museum than a place for toast and coffee. High ceilings, ivory molding, an oversized fireplace crackling faintly in the corner. Staff moved quietly between tables set with porcelain and silver. Madeline sat at the head like she owned the century. Robe silkier than necessary. Hair already perfect. Next to her sat a sleek tablet and a crystal flute of something orange. Mimosa, probably. Image mattered, even at 9 a.m. "Look who's awake," she said when Emily walked in. "You always looked more alive when you were painting." Emily offered a soft smile and took the seat furthest from her. "I was up late." Madeline gave her a sideways glance. "In the studio?" Emily nodded. "Alex told me you had quite the talent," Madeline said, raising her glass. "He said your painting stopped him in his tracks." Emily tried not to flinch. Madeline's gaze didn't soften. "I suppose that's impressive. Not many things stop him." The words sat between them like a thread pulled too tight. After breakfast, a housekeeper handed Emily a folded envelope. To Emily Warren. From the Hale Foundation. Inside was a statement. Her mother's name. The medical facility. Treatment schedule. Balance. Paid in full. Source of funds. Private transfer from Hale Family Trust. Not the public foundation. Not Madeline. Not a charity. Alex. Emily's hand trembled. She sat in the garden greenhouse, surrounded by roses not yet blooming, and let the realization hit her like thunder under glass. Every treatment, every extended care visit, every music therapy session her mother had needed in the past 8 months had been funded by him. But why? Why her? The sound of footsteps drew her from the storm in her chest. He stood just outside, the greenhouse door, one hand tucked into the pocket of his charcoal coat, the other holding a cup of tea. "You forgot this," Alex said simply, stepping inside. She didn't look up. You're funding my mother's treatment. Yes. Why? He paused. Because I could. That's not an answer. Alex stepped closer. Not so close to touch. Just enough for her to feel the weight of his presence again. Your sister mentioned her condition during dinner one night, he said, and I looked into it. I have access to care most people can't dream of. It didn't feel right to withhold that because of politics. Emily met his eyes. You barely knew me. I remembered you, he said, before I knew your name, before I knew you were Madeline's sister. I remembered the way you looked at that boy in the mural. He looked away. Like you saw him. All of him. Without needing him to be anything else. Emily swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. You didn't have to do it. I know, he replied, but I wanted to. There was a moment, so fragile it could have shattered if either of them breathed, too loudly, where neither one of them knew what to say. Then she stood, carefully smoothing her jacket. This changes things, does it? Yes, she said, because now I don't know what I'm here for. That evening, Emily found Madeline in the bridal suite, surrounded by boxes of couture, heels lined like weapons, and makeup artists, fluttering around her like anxious butterflies. You're earlier than I expected, Madeline said, motioning for one of the artists to stop. I was going to send for you. Emily held up the envelope. You lied to me. Madeline raised a brow. About what? You said the foundation was covering Mom's care. It wasn't. It was Alex. She clicked her tongue. Technicality. It's still coming from the same empire. Emily's voice sharpened. You used it to manipulate me. Madeline stood, slowly, her expression shifting from idle charm to surgical coldness. Manipulate is such an ugly word. I encouraged you to do the right thing. Our mother needs help. You know that. And you needed a perfectly obedient sister in your wedding. Photos? I needed someone who wouldn't cause a scandal 2 days before I marry the most powerful man in this region. Emily's breath hitched. You don't love him, she whispered. Madeline's smile returned, but it was hollow. I don't need to. Love fades, power doesn't. The room chilled. That night, Emily stood again in front of her painting. Only this time she wasn't alone. Alex was there. Not close, not looming. Just standing beside the easel, quietly looking at the man on the canvas. His eyes, the ones she had finally painted, stared back at them both. He looks like he's carrying too many things at once, Alex said quietly. She nodded. He is. Do you think he breaks? Emily looked over at him. I think he already did. He was silent for a long time. Then, why'd you give him eyes? Because he needed to be seen. He turned to her. So do you. It started with rain, not a storm, not thunder or violence. Just soft, rhythmic drops tapping against the glass like fingers on piano keys. Emily stood in the studio alone, barefoot, wrapped in a shawl that used to belong to her mother. The fireplace crackled behind her. Outside the window, the woods blurred in mist. Her painting stood in the center of the room, finished now. At least, as finished as she was willing to make it. She had given the man eyes, and for some reason, he no longer looked like someone waiting. He looked like someone who had already chosen. She had planned to pack, to sleep early, to leave in the morning before the wedding began. She had written the note to Madeline already, cold, respectful, final. But her suitcase remained open, half full, half forgotten, because something in the air felt unfinished. And Emily had learned that unfinished things, feelings, choices, people, always, came back. She didn't hear the door open. She only felt the shift in the air. A presence. Her brush dropped into the jar with a soft splash, and when she turned, he was there. Alex. No jacket. Shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms, eyes dark from something that wasn't exhaustion. Hair slightly wet, like he'd walked in the rain. His gaze moved over her bare feet, the shawl, the shadow of paint on her cheek, and he stopped breathing for a moment. So did she. "I shouldn't be here," he said first. She nodded. "I know." "I was walking," he added. "Ended. Up here." "Accident?" "No," he admitted. "Not even close." She swallowed. "It's the night before your wedding." He looked at her like the word wedding had no meaning left in it. "No," he said. "It's the night before a mistake." The silence between them thickened. Then he stepped forward, slowly, cautiously, like approaching something wild that might run. He moved to the painting. "He looks different now," Alex said, his voice low. "Not waiting. Ready." Emily's breath caught. "I gave him your eyes." His head turned sharply toward her. "But I didn't mean to," she said, softer. I think I always knew it was you." Something cracked. Not loudly, not visibly. But in the air between them, a fracture formed, and neither of them moved to stop it. Alex stepped closer. Emily's hand went to the edge of the table behind her. "I came to say goodbye," he said. She didn't speak. "I'm marrying someone. Tomorrow for the wrong reasons." She took a step back, but her feet betrayed her. "I'm doing it out of debt, out of guilt, out of an idea of what honor means." Her voice trembled. "And what does this mean?" He took another step. This means I feel alive. For the first time in years." Their eyes locked. Something passed between them, hot, fragile, irreversible. He was in front of her now, one breath apart. "If you ask me to leave," he said, voice hoarse, "I will." Emily stared at him, at the man who had undone her without touching her, who had seen her without needing permission, who had given without asking for anything. And she said, "Don't leave." The kiss wasn't sweet. It wasn't tentative or gentle. It was desperate. It was the collapse of restraint, the unraveling of everything they weren't supposed to want. His hands gripped her face like he was drowning. Her fingers twisted in his shirt like she was afraid he'd vanish. He lifted her onto the table, clearing the brushes and jars with a careless sweep. Her shawl fell. His mouth moved to her neck, and she gasped, clutching his shoulders, the heat of him burning through the silk of her nightdress. She had never been touched like this, not even in dreams. It was real and raw and chaotic. Her body, pressing against his hands leaving fingerprints on her hips, her thighs wrapping around him like she was anchoring both of them to the moment. And when he looked at her, really looked, she saw it. The surrender. He wasn't in control. Not anymore. Later, wrapped in the quiet of firelight and tangled sheets, Emily lay still, staring at the ceiling. Alex's arm was draped across her waist. His breath warmed the curve of her shoulder. Neither of them spoke, because nothing needed to be said. Not yet. But before sleep claimed her, she whispered into the dark, "You're not going to marry her, are you?" A beat. Then, no. And finally, "I already chose." The sun came up quietly, like it was trying not to interrupt anything. Emily woke first. Her head rested on Alex's bare shoulder, his chest rising and falling beneath her palm. The studio was still. The fire long since died, the shadows now, golden and stretching across the floor. She listened to his heartbeat and thought, How can something that feels this right come from something so wrong? She didn't move. Not right away. Because the moment she moved, it would become real. When she finally slipped from his arms, Alex stirred, but didn't wake. She found her dress folded over the back of a chair. Her shawl, still damp from the rain, lay crumpled in a corner. She dressed in silence, eyes burning, heart loud. Then she left, not out of fear, out of knowledge. Because the truth wasn't waiting, it was already here. The Hale estate was different in the morning, brighter but colder. Like a stage after the actors had all gone home and left their masks behind. Downstairs, the staff was in quiet panic. "Has anyone seen Miss Warren?" a voice whispered. "No sign of her since last night," another replied. "And Mr. Hale hasn't come down either." A flutter of movement, whispers, exchanged glances, phones ringing. Emily stepped into the hallway, and the entire world seemed to stop breathing. The wedding was in 3 hours, and the bride was missing. She found Madeline's room empty, no dress, no shoes, no note, only an open window, a breeze cutting through the lace curtains, and the echo of absence. Emily. She turned. Alex stood in the hallway, shirt on, hair wet from a quick shower, but face as unreadable as the sea. He looked at her like he already knew. She shook her head slowly. "She's gone." He didn't flinch. "I know." "You knew?" I suspected. "Last night? I think she was already planning it." Emily stepped back, voice tightening. "So you came to me because you knew she'd run?" His jaw tensed. "I came to you because I couldn't not come to you." She stared at him, stunned, silent. "Emily," he said gently, stepping closer. "I didn't choose you because Madeline left. I chose you despite everything that told me not to." By noon, news had leaked. There was no wedding. The press release was cold and surgical. Due to unforeseen personal matters, the Hale-Warren wedding has been indefinitely postponed. No names, no reasons, no emotion. By sunset, it was everywhere. Madeline Warren vanishes before wedding of the year. Runaway bride leaves billionaire groom at the altar. Sister of bride rumored to be involved in mysterious cancellation. Emily sat, alone in the greenhouse, headlines blooming on her phone like weeds. The comments were brutal. What kind of woman would do that to her own sister? She probably seduced him to climb the ladder. Typical gold-digging art girl. She turned off the screen and placed the phone face down, then sat still. Very still. Like maybe if she didn't move, none of it would be true. Footsteps behind. Her. She didn't turn this time. "I never meant for it to happen this way," Alex said. "Then how was it supposed to happen?" Her voice cracked like thin glass. "You marry my sister. I smile in pictures. We go our separate ways." He stood in silence. "I became a headline today," she said. "But not because I painted something beautiful. Not because I helped Jonah speak his first full sentence last week. Not because I taught 7 kids how to see colors with their hands." She turned to him. "I became a headline because I made the mistake of being seen." Alex's eyes darkened. Not with anger, but something worse. Helplessness. "Let me fix it," he said. "You can't," she replied. "I can explain. I'll tell them the truth. No one cares about the truth," she said bitterly. "They care about who bleeds better on camera." That night, she packed her things. No note this time. No drama. Just clothes, sketchbooks, a photograph of her mother from 10 years ago before the memory loss began. She zipped the suitcase and turned one last time toward the easel. The painting was still there. Still him. But she didn't take it. She left it for him. Because if he still wanted to look at her, he could do it with honesty now. She was nearly at the car when she heard him behind her. "Don't go." She didn't turn. "Emily." She exhaled slowly, like it might steady her hands. "I can't keep standing in someone else's shadow," she said. "Even if she's gone now. Even if you don't love her. I need to know who I am without being someone's sister. Someone's mistake. Someone's salvation." Alex took a step forward. "I don't want to save you," he said. "I want to stay beside you while you save yourself." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. But she didn't stop walking. She left the Hale estate without another word, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She felt like the story was finally hers, even if the whole world misunderstood it. The cabin was small, but it held a quiet. Emily hadn't heard in weeks. It was tucked behind a thicket of pine trees 2 hours from the estate. A borrowed space from a friend, with creaky floors and a wood stove that coughed to life only after 3 tries. But it was safe, and it was hers, if only for a little while. She turned her phone off on the second day. The headlines weren't slowing down, and neither were the assumptions. In the eyes of the world, she was already the villain. But she couldn't stay silent, forever. Not with the storm still churning beneath her skin. On the 3rd morning, Emily opened the envelope she had taken from the estate, one she hadn't dared to read until now. It was a letter from her mother's neurologist. At first, it looked like a routine update. Dosage changes. Therapy recommendations. Then, at the bottom, all expenses have been covered in full by a private patron, Alexander Hale. Authorization signed 6 months ago. Emily stared at the page. 6 months. That wasn't after the engagement. That was before. The engagement was even public, before her sister had even announced her perfect match to the media, before any of this, which meant Alex had known her name, long before Vermont, long before the mural, long before the kiss. She drove into town, that afternoon with hands trembling on the steering wheel and a single question ringing in her skull. What else don't I know? The town library had dusty Wi-Fi and even dustier carpet, but it had one thing she needed: quiet archives. Emily logged in and began pulling press releases, social records, and articles. She found it quickly. 3 years ago. A feature on local community art programs. A black and white photo of her standing next to Jonah, grinning, both hands covered in paint. The caption: Volunteer art teacher Emily Warren helps launch mural initiative for neurodivergent youth, supported in part by the Hale Foundation. She hadn't even remembered the photo being taken. Alex had seen this. He'd seen her. Before any party. Before any dinner with Madeline. Before the staged introduction. He had already known her face and stayed silent. Emily's phone buzzed for the first time in days. She'd left it on that morning. An accident, maybe. Or instinct. Unknown number. No caller ID. She let it ring once. Twice. Then she picked up. "Hello?" "It's me," Alex said. They met at the old conservatory on the edge of town, a place neither glamorous nor hidden, just neutral. A glass and iron structure slowly being eaten by vines. Emily arrived first. She stood by the entrance with her arms crossed, jacket zipped to her throat. When Alex walked in, he didn't try to smile. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "You knew I would," she replied. He nodded, eyes heavy. "I read the statement from the clinic," she said. "You started funding her treatment before you even proposed to Madeline." "Yes." "Why?" He stepped closer. "Because I saw you, that day, covered in paint, smiling at Jonah like he was the most important person in the world. I'd never seen someone look at another human like that." Emily swallowed. "You knew who I was." "I didn't. Not at first. But I remembered your face. I asked about you, and I found out. She stared at him. So when you met Madeline, I thought she was you. Emily took a step back, her throat tightening. Jesus, Alex. It wasn't a game, he said quickly. I didn't go after you. I buried it. I convinced myself I was wrong. That I imagined the feeling. And then I got engaged to the wrong person for the right reasons. My mother had just passed. I owed her a promise. I owed your father a debt. He looked down. And then you walked into the estate, and I knew I was already too late. Silence stretched between them, fragile and cold. You should have told me, Emily said. I know. You made me believe I was some accident of timing, some mistake you couldn't take back. I didn't want to trap you in the mess I made, he said, voice rough. I thought I was protecting you. You weren't, she said. You were protecting yourself. The air in the conservatory turned sharp, like it had been waiting for this truth. Alex took a slow breath. I didn't come to convince you, to forgive me. Emily blinked. I came to say I'm sorry, he said, and to tell you I'll leave you alone, if that's what you want. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, thin and silver. Paintbrush, not just any brush. Hers, the one she'd dropped during that night in the studio. Cleaned, wrapped, returned. He held it out. She didn't take it at first. Then she did. Her fingers brushed his, and the silence between them shifted, softened. That night, Emily sat alone in the cabin again. The brush lay beside her sketchbook. Outside, the rain had returned, this time louder, more certain. She stared at a blank page for a long time. Then she began to draw. Not Alex. Not the man on the canvas. Herself. And for the first time in a long time, the lines came easy. The knock came just after midnight. Emily had been staring at the same sketch. For over an hour, a charcoal outline of hands that didn't seem to know how to touch. The fire had burned low. Outside, the rain slowed to a mist, curling softly against the window. She didn't check who it was. She already knew. When she opened the door, Alex stood there, hood pulled back, shoulders soaked, eyes wild in that dangerous, exhausted kind of way. He didn't speak. Not at first. He simply looked at her. Looked like he'd crossed 100 miles just to find the right 3 feet between them. I told myself I wouldn't come, he said. She swallowed. So why are you here? His voice was quiet. Raw. Because I can't stop. She stepped aside. Let him in. Not out of weakness, but because the space between wanting and needing had vanished, and she wasn't scared of what she wanted anymore. The done. Door clicked shut behind him. Silence. No more excuses. No more explanations. Alex reached her like gravity. His hands found her waist as if drawn there by instinct, and when their mouths met, it wasn't slow. It was violent with all the things they hadn't said. She pressed into him, back hitting the wall with a soft thud. He groaned, low and guttural, as her fingers pulled at his jacket, his shirt, her breath, catching in sharp gasps each time their bodies collided. There was no hesitation, just need. Hands exploring, not delicately, but like they'd both been starving. He lifted her onto the counter, and she wrapped her legs around his hips like that was where they'd always belonged. His mouth moved down her neck, across her collarbone, tracing fire into her skin. And when she whispered his name, barely audible, he froze for just a second. Not to stop, but to look at her. And it was in that look, more than the kiss, more than the touch, that everything unspoken became real. She saw it in his eyes. You're the only one. You always were, and he saw it in hers. I'm not afraid of being seen anymore, He carried her to the bed, not like porcelain, but like something precious and his. Her nightshirt slid off her shoulders like silk surrendering to gravity. And when she stood bare before him, she didn't cover herself. He didn't worship her. He didn't marvel. He just came undone, and then came closer. Skin to skin, breath to breath, they met without pretense. No performative words. No slow metaphors, just rhythm. The way her hands gripped the back of his neck. The way his hips met hers in a tempo that felt like confession. The way she gasped his name, not like a plea, but like a vow. There was nothing careful about it. Nothing perfect. And yet, somehow it was. Later, the sweat between them cooled, and the world outside crept back in, quiet, damp, distant. They lay tangled in the sheets, their legs intertwined, his arm draped across her stomach, their breath sinking without effort. Neither spoke. Not right away, because when truth lives in the body, words become almost irrelevant. But then he moved, just slightly, and whispered into the space between her shoulder and neck. "I don't know what I am without you." Emily turned her head, met his eyes. "You're not mine to fix," she said. "I'm not asking to be fixed." "Then what are you asking for?" He paused. And then, to stay. They lay there, face to face, as dawn threatened on the edge of the sky. And Emily, for once, didn't feel like someone's mistake. She didn't feel like a secret. She didn't feel like a shadow. She felt chosen. Seen. Held. And in that warm, dim room, wrapped in worn sheets and steadier breath, she gave the only answer she had left, then stay. She returned to the estate like someone stepping onto a battlefield. There was no official invitation, no grand reunion, just a message. She's here. Madeline. Back after 10 days of silence. No press release, no apology, just presence, as if nothing had happened. Emily stepped out of the car and walked through the familiar stone archway, every footfall echoing with the weight of what hadn't been said. Alex waited just inside, leaning against the doorway of the conservatory. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His hand brushed hers lightly as she passed. A silent, "I'm with you." And she kept walking. Madeline sat in the sunroom, exactly where their father used to sit when discussing matters that weren't meant for children's ears. Sunlight dripped across the marble floor. She looked immaculate, like scandal hadn't touched her. As always. "Emily," she said calmly, crossing one leg over the other. Emily didn't sit. "You disappeared, the day of your wedding." Madeline smiled faintly. "You're welcome," Emily blinked. "I saved you the trouble of doing it yourself," her sister added. "I saw the way he looked at you, the way you looked at him." "I never asked for this," Emily said, her voice tight. "No," Madeline agreed. "You just breathed and waited for someone to notice." The words hit like a slap, but Emily didn't flinch. "You were always so quiet, so harmless," Madeline continued. "It was easy to pretend you didn't exist, until he made you real." Emily felt her jaw tighten. "This isn't about Alex." "Oh, honey," Madeline said, standing. "It was never not about Alex." Alex stepped into the room then, his presence cooling the air like a storm on the horizon. His gaze moved between them, unreadable, but alert. Madeline didn't acknowledge him. She looked only at Emily. "Did you sleep with him before or after I left?" she asked. The question sucked the oxygen from the room. Emily didn't answer right away. Then, with no apology in her voice, no shame. "Before." Madeline's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite rage. "I guess I should thank you," she said, pacing slowly. "You took the fall. The press never came after me. They went after you, the shy little sister, the soft one. You gave them exactly what they wanted. Emily's voice trembled, but it didn't break. They made up their own story. Madeline laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. They always do. But you fed it. With that face, that innocence, that damn painting. Alex's voice cut through. That painting was never about you. Finally, Madeline turned to him. No, it was about her. It always was. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was pure, burning. Madeline looked at Emily again, softer this time. You think you were the victim, she said. But you have no idea what it's like being the one everyone expects to win. Every room I walk into, I have to own it. Every man I date, I have to conquer him. Every success I claim, I have to defend it. She took a shaky breath. You were always free to be invisible. I had to be unforgettable, even when it killed me. Emily's chest tightened. Madeline wasn't cruel in that moment. She was just tired. I don't hate you, Emily said quietly. Madeline blinked. I never did. I just stopped trying to make you see me. Madeline looked away, blinking fast, like something behind her eyes might shatter. Then softly, you should go. But it wasn't dismissal. It was release. They left the room without ceremony. Outside, the clouds hung low, but the wind had shifted. Emily stood at the top of the marble stairs, looking out over the estate that had once swallowed her whole. Alex stepped beside her. He didn't reach for her. He just waited. She's not a monster, Emily said. No, he replied. Just broken in a different way. Emily nodded. I don't know what happens next, she added. I do, he said. She looked at him, and, finally, he said it. Not in a whisper, not in a metaphor, not between the lines. I love you. She exhaled, and then, for the first time in a very long time, she smiled. 6 months later, Emily stood in a room full of light. It wasn't grand. Just a repurposed industrial space downtown. Tall windows, exposed beams, raw brick walls kissed by morning sun. Easels lined the walls, and laughter floated up from a group of children painting in the back. But the real exhibition was in the front gallery. Her name was on every canvas. Emily Warren. Signed in the corner, unapologetically. Every letter confident. Every stroke hers. The final piece in the collection, the one everyone seemed to pause at just a little longer, was hung alone, centered under a skylight. It was a portrait. A man with his back turned, standing before a wall of glass, surrounded by woods. His reflection faint, almost ghost-like. His posture quiet, but not afraid. And yet, the real detail, the thing no one could name, was in the way the light fell over his shoulder, as if someone had just walked into the room behind him. Someone he'd been waiting for. Emily didn't linger near that one. She floated from person to person, smiling, soft-spoken, answering questions, letting herself be seen without shrinking. She wasn't running anymore. Not from the headlines, not from Madeline's shadow, not from herself. Outside, the late spring sun warmed the sidewalk. Across the street, leaning against a silver car with sleeves rolled to his elbows and sunglasses pushed up into his hair, stood Alex. He wasn't dressed for power anymore. No suit. No driver. No script. Just a man who had learned how to wait without demanding. When Emily finally stepped outside, she didn't rush. He watched her approach like it was the first time all over again. You didn't come in, she said. I didn't want to steal your light. She rolled her eyes. That's corny. It's true. She paused in front of him, tilting her head. You still don't look real, you know. Neither do you, he said. But here we are. They drove with the windows down, hair tangled in wind, fingers loosely entwined over the console. No music, just road and breath and the language of comfort. They arrived at the house just after sunset. Not a mansion, not a cottage. A quiet 2-bedroom, with paint-stained floorboards and a sunroom big enough for a studio. A place Emily had chosen. A place he had offered, not bought. Not gifted. Just opened. For them. Later that night, wrapped in old cotton sheets in silence, Emily lay curled into Alex's side, head resting just beneath his collarbone. She traced a lazy circle on his chest with her fingertip. You remember that first night in the studio? Do I remember the night I stopped pretending? He asked. Yeah, vividly. She smiled, small and real. I didn't know who I was then, she said. You do now? Emily paused. I think I'm learning. But this version, the one who signs her name and doesn't apologize for what she wants, yeah, I like her. Alex pulled her closer. You made me see myself differently, he said. Not the man people expected. Just me. Still sharp-jawed and annoyingly handsome, she teased. And stupid in love with you, he added. She laughed, then stilled. Say it again, she whispered. He pressed his mouth to her forehead and said it. Like a vow. I love you. Outside, wind swept gently through the open windows. Inside, no promises were needed. They had already been made. In a glance across the studio, in a kiss that defied timing. In silence, in truth, in the unspoken language of two people who had finally chosen each other. Not out of need, not out of guilt, not out of fear, but because when the dust settled, they still reached for each other. And when Emily drifted off to sleep, her hand tucked in his, her breath even and soft, Alex whispered into the dark. You were never her shadow. You were always the light. If this story moved you, even just a little, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. It helps us keep creating more moments that stay with you long after the last word.